Welcome to a new daily top AskReddit video. Today's topic:
when did you notice something about someone after years of knowing them? My dad always left the last piece of food for me. Took me 23 years to realize he wasn't just not hungry. So kind and sweet. He loved you. This is straight up wholesome. You dad is a strong man. When I realized my quirky friend was actually a master manipulator. Took years to see the pattern. I noticed every time I interacted with my super friendly and nice boss I felt like absolute shit about myself. Especially if the topic involved any sort of raise for my, frankly, stellar performance, not to toot my own horn but toot toot. Then I happened to mention it to a much older coworker one day and he was like, yeah, the boss is a master manipulator who gets off on undermining your confidence and making you question yourself. He's very good. I had my doubts but he was right. It was actually glaringly obvious once I started looking for it. So, that people like your boss are some of the worst people you'll ever meet. The ones who present a friendly face while actively trying to keep you down so they can continue to take advantage of you. It's not unlike being trapped in an abusive relationship, treat you like shit and have you blaming yourself, leaving you grateful that anyone wants someone like you at all. After years of knowing someone I thought a friend, I realized that they only keep me about to be the butt of the joke. I plucked up the courage to chime in with a joke about them for a change. Only for it to be reacted to like I'd committed a crime. Cue me being cursed out and told to mind my place. If somebody ever tells you to mind your place, that is not a somebody you need to keep in your life. They will always believe they are better than you and treat you accordingly. A good friend of a few years wasn't just wily and difficult to make plans with, they had a legitimate drug problem and hid from everyone because they were ashamed of it. Far as I know, they're doing better these days. A good friend who is wholly unreliable likely has undiagnosed ADHD and anxiety and cannot handle much. I try to be patient and understanding but I'm feeling like it's not working. Honestly, I am this friend. Sometimes calling it out from an empathetic and genuinely hurt, concerned place is helpful. My friend did this to me and it opened the door for conversation as to why I get so unreliable, MIA, procrastinator. We are two very emotionally aware people, her more than me clearly lol, so our conversation was aimed at solving the problem together instead of attacking. It was really sweet and I felt so loved and actually had a bit of peace instead of the constant guilt. It was a difficult conversation, but our friendship is better for it. Try to love, support and be understanding, but don't enable. It's a fine line. Best of luck and sending love to you and your friend Yellow Heart. The day I realized that my so-called friend actually only had time for me when they wanted something. That's always a good thing to notice. I have friends who never reach out unless they need something. Usually when they reach out, even if they don't ask for anything, I respond and say, I don't have time, can't do anything, and then they, unsurprisingly, vanish. Yep, 2024 was the year I learned this lesson and left the ball in a bunch of other people's courts to see if they make a play. Some have, some haven't. Got my answers and I'm entering 2025 with a new outlook on life and the people I keep around me. I did the same thing, except no one reached out to me. Looks like I was the problem. I found out my dad has been left-handed his whole life, but he writes with his right hand because of school rules when he was a kid. Took me 20 years to catch that he does everything else with his left hand. My mom is the same. Imagine getting slapped on your hands with a ruler by a nun because your devilish left-handedness. One of my best friends eats the paper you take off a straw. The first time I saw it, I was like WTF. He gave me a strange look and said he'd done it every time for the past 10 years we'd known each other. I suppose I'm not very observant. Eating the paper itself isn't that gross IMO, but thinking about how many hands, surfaces the paper has touched protecting the straw is a bit unsettling. Your friend probably has an amazing immune system, or he is the harbinger of the next plague. Harbinger, this is funny. One of my closest pals used to compete in figure skating, I discovered. She never brought up the fact that we had been friends for years. She casually remarked that she used to compete at a national level during a conversation discussing childhood pastimes. I was taken aback. It was amazing to witness a whole different side of her, and she even showed me some old pictures and videos. Met a nice woman at a school event and it was obvious she is very bright, but I didn't think much about it. Until one day I found out she is a very popular well-known writer, won all sorts of awards, several best-selling books, friends with celebrities, etc. When I found out I called her immediately and asked why she never told me and she casually said her books are controversial and doesn't like to lose friends over it. Still friends to this day and her career rarely comes up in conversations. My Mill was an Olympic swimmer who had won several national titles and had set a few records before making the team. She was so quiet and modest about it for the rest of her life that my husband only knew she'd been a competitive swimmer at one point and knew she'd had a box with some medals in it. Wow, that's crazy. Did you ask her why she never brought it up? She didn't know how to break the ice. I had a really good friend in college. I actually still keep in touch with him, approximately 25 years after graduating. I became friends with him our freshman year, and lived down the hall from him in a dorm my sophomore year. Super cool guy, was one of the few kids on campus with his own car, even though it was an older Jeep. Towards the end of sophomore year, we're deciding what to do for spring break and he casually mentions his family has a house in the Florida Keys that we could go down to. Like 10 of my friends were going to go, and I thought the idea of driving 20 hours to get down there and squeeze into a house with 10 other guys seemed like torture. Turns out the guy is beyond wealthy. His house was apparently like a 10-bedroom mansion on an island with only 2 other houses. I later came to learn he had a huge 4-bedroom apartment in NYC in case his family went to the city for and didn't want to go back to their house. He had a huge 10-plus bedroom on the Jersey Shore, like right on the water. It had a pool in the front yard and a 2-bedroom pool house. People walking along the boardwalk would stop and take pictures of the house. It was so crazy. His parents used their own private jet to fly his brother to from college on weekends so they'd see him more often. All the time, he was the most down-to-earth, chillest dude I knew. He's still moving every 2 or 3 years, and when I get a Christmas card from him, I can't help but check the address, and it's always a bigger, fancier house than his previous one. Believe it or not, he was the second wealthiest person I knew. First was someone whose parents owned the parking garages around most professional sports stadiums, arenas. Apparently stadiums don't own their own parking lots, garages. And this guy's family owned many of them. Side comment, in high school we had an eccentric teacher who only taught 3 classes, driver's ed, typing, this was a long time ago, and business. It was interesting that every September he got a new car, that was when the new models came out. Turns out his whole family was wealthy from owning parking lots around USC. One of his siblings even had a seat on the NY Stock Exchange. He said he taught because he liked teaching. One of my best friends went to Vanderbilt. He came back to visit our home city one Christmas and a buddy came up with him to visit. His buddy was super nice and laid back. I was a firefighter at the time and getting ready to leave for Marine Corps boot camp. His buddy thought this was just so cool and insisted on covering drinks for me and 2 other friends with me all night while asking all kinds of questions about firefighting and what I was gonna do in the Marines. We all had a great time and the bill for all of us was like $300, $400, which is a shit ton for a college kid. A few days later I'm talking to my friend about how cool it was for him to shell out so much dough for us and he was like, oh, Dave. He does this shit all the time. His dad is an oil tycoon in Texas with a net worth over $1.5 billion. He and his twin sister have a trust fund that gives them over $600,000 every year and he says he already has everything he needs so he just likes paying for people's stuff. Dave, you're a real one. I noticed about 6 years together, 3 of them married, that my husband has a very slight lisp. He was very shocked that I had just now noticed it. To be fair to myself though, I have a hard time hearing. I have a slight speech impediment, and I frequently have to repeat my name for cashiers, but people who have known me a long time often can't believe it when I tell them. After a while, you just get used to how someone speaks. My 4 years old, Mom, did you know Aunt Diane and Uncle Don are black? Yes, they were and he had just noticed. My sister-in-law didn't realize for about 10 years that our cousin was adopted. Our cousin's parents are white. Our cousin is Korean. I have a full Mexican cousin by marriage and never realized, until about high school, there was anything different about my cousin's husband despite him being several shades darker than me and speaking a different language as his first language. It was just the way things were. Because of a widespread of children among my aunts and uncles, his daughter was about my age and being closely related to someone with the last name Hernandez didn't seem at all weird to me either. About myself, I didn't realize until I was almost 20 that I play pool left-handed. I'm right-handed and I noticed my cousin used the opposite hands I did while we were playing. I said, Andy, I didn't know you played pool left-handed. He said, I don't, you do. Turns out I learned to play pool by mimicking my dad, who is, surprise surprise, left-handed and just never put 2 and 2 together. I had the opposite realization the other day lol as a left-hander. Realized I use my knife and fork the same way everyone else in my family does, all right-handed, and it's because I just copied him as a kid. Same with things like knitting and ball-oriented sports. Weird that I never noticed. I used to shoot with my left hand. I played basketball in grade school. Let me tell you, I was a kick-ass ball handler and defender but I could not shoot. My entire grade school career consisted of like 12 points. No one noticed or told me I was shooting with the wrong hand. It was when I was playing horse with some friends in high school and my boyfriend pointed it out. What an epiphany. Lol, no wonder I sucked. I learned to shoot from my left-handed sister. After 8 years of friendship with my best friend, I found out that it really annoys her when people slurp. All these years, she put up with my slurping and never said anything because she loves me and didn't want to hurt my feelings. As a fellow misophonia sufferer, this has been a true act of love, face holding back tears. For real. Slurping, chewing, and smacking sounds make me irrationally angry. Gum cracking will make me lose my shit faster than just about anything.